And so today we wanted to have a conversation about the new documentary on Netflix called Being Eddie. And we just enjoyed watching that.
Absolutely.
We enjoyed watching that. Much of the documentary was around not only am I doing something that hadn't been done, and you talked about that TikTok era. Eddie was saying there was the only Black person on television was Julia, played by Diane Carroll.
Yeah.
And so when I came home and said I wanted to be on television, we really have to. That was like a splash of cold water on my face. Like, he was saying he wanted to be on television when there was no one on television.
Yeah. He was open.
Yeah.
And unafraid, but at the same time, he had to be professional enough to execute these movies, which is impressive. And I think where I was going with that is sometimes when you are a barrier breaker, you do have to be, a little bit of a Trojan horse, to get through the door, you know what I mean? And obviously he was, outspoken, confident, witty and all that, but he also was able to open doors for the next regime.
Welcome to With Love, The Chambers.
Where life, laughter, and lasting lessons meet.
We're The Chambers, a husband and wife navigating faith, family, and everything in between.
Here we share real stories, heartfelt conversations, and a whole lot of love. Because life isn't perfect, but God's grace sure is.
So pull up a seat, grab a cup of coffee, or go ahead and sip that tea, and join us for honest talks, laughs, and the wisdom we're learning along the way. This is With Love, The Chambers.
This episode of With Love, The Chambers is proudly sponsored by the Watts of Power Foundation, where passion and purpose come together to empower the next generation. In the heart of Los Angeles, one foundation is changing the future of education. The Watts of Power Foundation, founded by Dr. Peter Watts Jr., is on a mission to raise up the next generation of Black male educators, building strong teachers, strong families, and strong communities. Through mentorship, housing, and holistic support, Watts of Power is lighting the path toward equity in education. Visit wattsofpowerfoundation.org to learn how you can help power the change. The Watts of Power Foundation, where teaching meets transformation. A big thank you to Watts of Power for supporting this episode of With Love, The Chambers. And now, back to your regularly scheduled show.
Welcome to another With Love Wednesday. I am Jamila Chambers, and I am sitting here in our conversation room with my handsome husband, Rufus Chambers, the vision engineer himself.
That's right.
And we are so thrilled and excited to be back with you on another fantastic Wednesday. We're looking forward to a very fun conversation today. We thought we would lighten it up, and we haven't shined a light and had a little levity in quite a while. And in fact, we might let y'all in on some of the behind the scenes footage because I don't think I knew the cameras was rolling a few minutes ago, and I was having me a good old time because, as Rufus always says, I will tickle my own self and laugh at my own jokes. So I was having me a good time with that, like no other. Like no other. And so today we wanted to have a conversation about the new documentary on Netflix called Being Eddie. And we just enjoyed watching that.
Absolutely.
We enjoyed watching that. And of course, not only did we enjoy watching that, it was a time of nostalgia for us. We learned some things about Eddie Murphy that we didn't know. But as always, we had the opportunity to get inspired and hope to share and extract a few leadership lessons and a few principles and a few things that we learned that I think we can all glean from. Yes. One thing about watching documentaries, reading books, learning from the lives of others is that we get the privilege of studying greatness. And we get the privilege of learning from people in real time, just what they did, right or wrong, good or bad, from the triumphs and the mistakes to get where they are today. So Eddie Murphy, the person that has changed our vernacular, I don't think there's a day that goes by when we don't quote him,
Yes.
where we
That's
don't
just
break out into,
beautiful.
what is that, velvet? I mean, like, it's just not
Yeah.
a day that goes by where there's not something
Absolutely.
that comes up related to Eddie Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get started with the principles, what we learned, what we took away, what we want to share with our listeners today, general reactions to that for you,
General reactions to the
to the
documentary.
documentary.
No, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the documentary for so many
It
reasons.
was good.
I think number one, it was very thoughtfully done. I feel like whoever produced it was able to capture who he is as a man versus just the performer. So I
Mhm.
felt like who he is as an individual really showed through. And it was refreshing, to hear him kind of step back out of his career and
Yes.
offer insight, testimonies, and just kind of track his journey. So, and I think I was pleasantly surprised in that, prior to seeing that, I don't think I would have expected him to, at least in the documentary, felt very down to earth,
Mhm.
very relatable.
Mhm.
As successful as he's been, as wealthy as he is, as well traveled as he seemed very relatable, from his upbringing, from his family, dealing with loss, dealing with success, dealing
Mhm.
with lulls in our careers, and then dealing with, a resurgence, and even transitioning from single to married father, now
Mhm.
grandfather,
Sure.
even seeing him kind of go through that, So I really, really enjoyed it. Really. And to your point, I feel like he's one of those persons that were really a part of a childhood and
Oh,
part of a
absolutely.
maturation process.
Absolutely.
And many laughs were granted by way of Eddie Murphy, not just for me, but family laughs. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Seeing Coming to America together as a family. I mean, those moments were just very special. So to your point about it having just a lot of nostalgia.
Yes.
So yeah, so no, those were, some of my
100%. And
initial
it's so
reactions.
interesting that you talk about just feeling like you had the opportunity to get to know him,
Mm,
because unlike the way celebrity is obtained now,
yeah.
and they even talked about it in the documentary, was one of those people that represented the end of that old Hollywood
Yes.
era
Yes.
where you did
Yes.
not have access
That's
to
yes.
celebrities in the way
Yes.
that
Yes.
there's that access. There's
Yes.
so many people on platforms just like one that you and I are talking on now that used to be behind the veil, so to speak.
Yes.
And
Yes.
now whether you're an athlete or you're an entertainer or you're a politician, um, that access that people have to
Mhm.
you is so different.
Yeah.
Whereas Eddie, back then, you got to know him really primarily through the art.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, whether you saw him on Saturday Night Live for the first time, or those early films, Trading Places and
Mhm.
48 Hours
Yes.
and all of
Yes.
those things, or whether you were introduced to him like our children were all
Mhm.
those years later as Dr. Doolittle and Daddy Daycare, and,
Yeah.
the way they got to know him, Candy Cane Lane,
Yeah.
most recently, even over the holidays.
Mhm.
And so, no matter how you got the opportunity to experience him, it was primarily through art up until now. It
Mhm.
was like the first time I felt
Yeah.
that he spoke about himself
Yes.
to a degree and to a depth kind of outside of uh, the art form of it,
Mhm.
and the interviews surrounding the art and the interviews, kind of leading up to that.
Yeah.
Um, but starting off at the beginning, which I thought was very, very interesting, and you and I have a young budding artist in our
Yes.
house as well.
Mhm.
He said flat out, "I was born for this."
Mhm.
I was born for this.
Yeah.
And I was struck by, and I'm not going to do any spoilers for those that haven't watched the documentary
Yeah.
because he talks very extensively about his upbringing and
Mhm.
parents and impact of his fathers, plural,
Yes.
had on his life. But I think back, and he was so sure and so certain at single digits,
Yeah.
8, 9, 10, um, middle school age, this is what
Mhm.
I want to do. And I was thinking about just the people that had to surround him,
Mhm.
the adults in his life that encouraged him
Yes.
at that age to nurture that gift.
Yes.
And think it not strange that he wanted hand puppets so he can do
Mhm.
voices
Yes.
as holiday gifts
Yeah.
and all of those things. And so for you, when you're exposed to that, and we talk a lot on this platform about people that speak into our lives and
Mm.
mentorship and the way gifts and talents are developed, I thought that was a critical and crucial moment, like even before there was a name in lights,
Yeah.
even before there was um, the artistry that we have come to experience, there were people that just didn't talk him out of it or
That's
didn't
right.
tell him that he couldn't
That's
do it.
right.
And I thought that was powerful.
Yeah.
What's your response to that portion of his life, those early days, those first moments
Mhm.
before becoming the Eddie that we got the opportunity to meet?
It was very refreshing, to hear that he was in an environment where he was allowed to work out his gift as a boy, as a
Yes.
child. And, I think a lot of times, we see it manifest itself if it's a sport, if it's a musical instrument,
Mhm.
but comedy, I think, is something more peculiar and more unique.
Yes.
So to see him talk about that, it was refreshing, to hear, that, a family, a young man growing up, in that era, the 60s and 70s, that his parents and his village, they allowed him that space to do that.
Yes.
And they did it so much so that he was able to, like you say, articulate at a very young age, this is what I'm doing,
Yes.
and I'm going to be famous by the time I'm 18 years old. I mean,
Absolutely.
that to say that at that time, because, saying that in the TikTok era, that's
Yes.
one thing. You're
Yes.
looking for one reel to go viral and then
Sure.
I'm popular.
Sure.
We think about people like, the guy Shiggy who blew up however many, I don't know what he's doing now,
I don't know.
but
I don't know if Kiki still love him.
yeah,
I don't know
I
if
don't,
Kiki's still riding, but apparently Kiki was riding for him at
but
one point.
he became famous
Yes.
in this viral.
Somebody got to tell us in the chat. For some reason, I think he got in some big trouble.
No, I don't think
Is
so.
that not him?
No,
Okay.
no, no,
Okay, I'll
not
bring it
him,
back.
not
Okay.
him. But anyway, but for him to say it in the 70s that by the
Yes.
time I'm 18, I'm gonna be famous, that was a very confident statement. And again, he was working it out in real time. And even how he said his first routines was really about impressions,
Yes.
so that was the door. And then getting on Saturday Night Live as
Yes.
a teenager,
Yes.
and
19 or so years
representing
old, something like
this
that.
new comedic guard there. And what happened? We saw what happened. History was made. But, I think it's a lesson for parents, and even young people that, really doing soul searching and really trying to identify the uniqueness of your gifting, the what differentiates you from your peers, and the power of preparation, the power of practice, the power of rehearsal,
Yes.
which I think that may be a lost art with some people in our demographic. We often hear
Yes.
some entertainers say we started rehearsing 2 years before we ever performed on
Sure.
the stage. New
Sure.
Edition, we were just listening to them the other day, and the
Yes.
discipline, but the discipline reflected a belief,
Yes.
right? It reflected a confidence. It reflected being convinced that we're good, we have something to offer, which says a lot. It says a lot. But yeah, that was very refreshing, to me. And I guess, Jamila, maybe you could jump in here as a parent. And again, I don't want to put our kids on Front Street, but as a parent, how have you tried to balance, you know, your children, our children, identifying gifting, pursuing dreams, but also being balanced,
Yes.
with, we don't want to raise irresponsible adults that
Yes.
are moochers and leeches, right? Let's just say
Yes.
what it is. How have you balanced that? You know what I mean? Because I feel like that may I think there's a conversation there to be had.
Yeah, so for sure. And I tell this story often, and I think you and I were very, very aligned as parents that we just had no problem investing in exposing them.
Okay.
Like, so
Exposure.
that was I think something fundamental from a value statement that
Hmm.
we were going to expose our kids,
Yeah.
and whether it was dance lessons and let's see if that takes off. No, you don't like dance lessons so much, or
Yeah.
piano,
Yeah.
not really feeling piano, but we were
Mhm.
willing to try it. And there was that conversation about exposure, and then there was the collision between exposure and then their natural giftings and
Mhm.
talents and what they became passionate about.
Yeah.
And our oldest daughter, for example, used to run track for many
Mhm.
years in
Yeah.
the elementary school through most of middle school. And so that
Mhm.
was about a 5-year period of
Yeah.
time or so that was really very much a part of her life. And not only did she get exposed to other things along the way, and that was the thing that stuck,
Yeah.
it was, we can tell by her level of preparation, you didn't have to wake her up in the morning to
Mhm.
get excited about going to a track meet, or she wanted to work hard in
Mhm.
practice, and all of these things. So there was these indicators, and the way we say it to our kids is that we will always match your effort, right?
Mhm.
That's a saying that you and I
Yeah.
have said to them over the years. Hey, champ, we will match your efforts.
Mhm.
And so she made it easy for us to match her efforts because we could see that she was giving her version of best, whatever that looked
Yeah.
like as a 7 or 8 year old,
Yeah.
a 10, 11-year-old, right? Whatever that
Mhm.
looked like, she was giving her best. And then we would in turn do that.
Mhm.
But then there became a point where
Mhm.
it was like, you're not getting no taller. And these kids are getting faster. And these kids are getting stronger. And your talent and maybe even your passion for it is not aligning,
Mhm.
with you continuing to compete, right, at the
Mhm.
level that maybe your heart's desire is to compete.
Mhm.
And that was a conversation, right? And that happened somewhere around in the middle school, start of high school.
Mhm.
Like, is this something that you see yourself doing on the level that you desire to do it
Yeah.
in high school, in college, and beyond? And the answer to that was no. We had to have a very frank conversation that even though that was a really big part of her life,
Mhm.
at that point, that was a part of her life that served a purpose. And we still talk about those lessons. You and I can do a whole podcast, and probably should, about those lessons we learned
Yeah.
from those track days. And you
Mhm.
also participated as a track athlete, in
Mhm.
particular, how that sport is so applicable to so many
Yeah.
things. But in that, she also continued to pick up this business gift. That's where those entrepreneurial
Yes,
giftings
ma'am.
kicked in, and she went to a business camp and wrote a business plan and started to win awards for this business plan that she perfected over a period of time, and was able to see the fruits of that,
Yeah.
and that is what she has been able to utilize. So no experience is ever wasted. But as a parent, it was very important to say, sometimes there's going to be ebbs and flows and things are that we start and stop. But it was the principle of, I'm going to try it. I'm going to close the exposure gap. I'm going to, give it my all and then make the transition. And then we
Yeah.
have a younger daughter that, very much like Eddie Murphy, said on the sofa that's to my left, right off camera, when she was about 9 years old, I know what I was born to do,
Hmm.
and has done that very thing, since
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
And so I think that was part of it for us as parents, and for us having that conversation, that all of our children have unique gifts and talents and
Mhm.
abilities. And sometimes we're able to identify those things very early on, and they stick to it. And sometimes it's, I need to have these experiences along the way that will now give my daughter, that's a business student,
Mhm.
language, competitive language that she
Yeah.
developed as a child, but utilized in a different sport, in a different race, right? So she
Mhm.
still is utilizing those principles and that mindset, but in a different
Yeah.
capacity. And so as parents, I think the biggest thing that I took away is to pay attention.
That's
Our
good.
kids are just, our kids are giving us feedback even at a very young age, and there's an opportunity there to pay attention. And then also, and I want to get your feedback on this, one of those things about Eddie's career very early on was that there was no blueprint.
Mm.
And so much of the documentary was around, not only am I doing something that hadn't been done, and you talked about that TikTok era. Eddie was saying there was, the only Black person on television was Julia,
Mhm.
uh,
Diane Carroll?
played by Diane Carroll.
Yeah.
And so when I came home and said I wanted to be on television,
Yeah.
we really have to. That was like a splash of cold water on my face. Like, he was saying he wanted to be on television when there was no one on television.
Yeah.
And so Eddie talks about being the first in breaking through these barriers
Mhm.
in the sketch comedy space in Saturday Night Live,
Yeah.
breaking through the barriers in the box office, going from the buddy role
Yeah.
in movies, which many Black actors played, if they did play those characters, to lead,
Yes.
and what that meant
Quickly too. Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah.
and we're talking like 48 months
Yeah.
to
Yes.
play on 48 hours, Steve. Literally, it was a 4-year period of time where it was just breaking down all of these different
Mhm.
stereotypes and paradigms, and having no one there to be a roadmap or a pathway for you.
Yeah.
He tells a story about James Brown saying, "If
Yeah.
you got $1 million, go bury it,
In the
go
backyard.
bury it in the backyard, go bury it in the backyard,
Yeah.
because you couldn't, number one, possibly have $1 million
Yeah.
dollars, and number two, if you do, there's no one there to talk to you about investing it,
Yeah.
about setting up your financial house to be
Mhm.
able to support you from a generational wealth standpoint. There was none of those conversations. If you got $1 million, go bury it in the backyard so the government don't come take it. Like,
Mhm.
that was the type of advice that he was given. So as you think about like that portion of his career, and he articulated it so well, and it's so common for us now to see a Michael B. Jordan, a
Yeah.
Denzel. He even said there was no Morgan Freeman,
Yeah.
there was
Yeah.
no Denzel Washington, there
Yeah.
was no, and so it's so common for us to
Mhm.
see all of these folks now.
Yeah.
But as you think about that back then, reflect on that impact for you about him breaking those barriers and being that standard bearer in so many ways across the genre.
Yeah. I think when we were living through it in real time, right? We were kids and teenagers and young
Yes.
adults seeing him just take off on this amazing run. We
Yes.
were laughing,
Sure.
right? The world was laughing.
Sure.
And I think that speaks to the power of laughter, how laughter can be a a, a, a barrier breaker, And that's something that we've talked about privately. Like, you can never exhaust people wanting to laugh.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
it's like milk. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Some people gonna
Yes.
buy a gallon of milk or half a
Sure.
gallon every week for the rest of their lives.
Sure.
That's what laughter is.
Sure.
And I felt like his ability to make people laugh, it began to open doors. In the documentary, they're talking about when he came on the scene, all of the historic old Hollywood garb all
Yes.
wanted to meet him, and he started naming the who's who from that previous era.
Old
and
Hollywood.
Old Hollywood. And I think, again, it was laughter, but also it was clear he had a presence, he had a maturity, and he didn't even talk about that, but he would not have been able to do what he was able to do
Yes.
without having some level of decorum.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because it was too groundbreaking.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So that was another thing, like, him going into these rooms with this old Hollywood place and getting to these directors and the producers to believe in him, he obviously handled himself with a certain level of maturity. You know what I mean? Because if not, they would have shut the door. Hollywood, yeah, they made money off Eddie Murphy, but they weren't, quote unquote, needing him, quote
Sure.
unquote. You know
Sure.
what I mean? So, that was wonderful to see. And I think, when you think about it, and we think about the brashness of his stand-up.
Sure.
He would get on stage and say some wild stuff.
Absolutely.
About men, about women, about sexuality.
We just watched Raw again last night.
About
after
rape,
the documentary.
You know what I mean? So it's clear that he was open.
Yeah.
And unafraid, but at the same time, he had to be professional enough to execute these movies, which is impressive, And I think where I was going with that is sometimes when you are a barrier breaker, you do have to be, a little bit of a Trojan horse, to get through the door. You know what I mean? And obviously he was, outspoken, confident, witty, and all that, but he also was able to open doors for the next regime, next, and I think, again, and that's why I always talk about laughter and music, those, and sports, really.
Yeah.
And you think about, the history of African Americans in the United States, those three things, entertainment, athletics, and music, have opened countless doors for some of our most talented and gifted people. And they, to a certain extent, normalized our place and our presence in this nation through the arts, which is there's something to be said about that. And, we could take this conversation a whole different direction, but, I appreciate that about him. And I, one of the things I was really surprised about, Jamila, in the documentary, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is, when he said, he wasn't a big partier. He wasn't snorting cocaine. He wasn't using heroin. He said, first time I smoked marijuana, I was 30 years old, and he had been in entertainment since 18. So even
in the 80s.
In the 80s, mind you, where,
It took Dave Chappelle to break that down. No.
Those were the cocaine.
Yeah. No, he survived being Eddie Murphy in the 80s.
In the 80s, you know what I mean? Were you surprised at hearing him say that? And what reflection did you have, seeing him share that? And I don't think at 60-something years old, he's going to get on the TV and lie. He's going to say what it is, right?
Yeah.
What was your response on that? And were you surprised?
So I was surprised with how clean. So when you and I were watching this, we are looking at him physically.
Yes.
And for those of you that haven't seen the documentary, please do. It was so good. But we have this saying, I have to bring my white folks and my white listeners up to speed. If you haven't heard that term, black don't crack. That is a saying in the black community.
Yes. Yeah.
That black folks just tend to age well. If you quote unquote live clean, don't do a lot of heavy drinking,
Yeah.
don't do a lot of heavy smoking. And that clean living is also attributed to treating people well and being a person of faith and all the things. If you quote unquote live clean, as black folks, you tend to physically age well. That's just part of the benefits package. And so we're looking at Eddie and we're saying he looks good. I mean, just
looks great.
You can just tell that he hasn't lived a hard life.
A rough, yes.
So hard life in the sense of doing hard drugs and not treating his body well and things of that nature. So when he said it and we're physically looking at him, we said, that makes sense.
Yes.
Because we're looking at, and also too, and we've done many conversations on this podcast about the level of scandal people have lived through and our heroes have lived through and the credibility. And Eddie is the first to tell you when I was in the 80s doing Raw and telling these jokes about Eddie Murphy, he tells this joke when he does the stand-up opening monologue on the anniversary of Saturday Night Live. He said, if you would have told my younger self that I would be here all these years later and Bill Cosby would be the person that was coming out of jail and, having all these legal issues and having his credibility questioned the way it has been. And I'm the person at home with 10 kids and living a quiet life. He said, I would have even taken that bet. I would have bet against me if you would have told me that this is how this would have turned out all these years later. So for us to live through the season we've lived through with so many of our heroes being diminished by not having private lives that were able to support their public personas, it did not come as a surprise when he said it. But I mentioned that Dave Chappelle comment because Dave Chappelle also contributed to the documentary. And he said, you have to really understand that being Eddie Murphy in the 80s was something. And Eddie Murphy survived being Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
Eddie Murphy survived being Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was very telling. And it was also talked about, Tracy Ellis Ross talked about the evolution of his artistry as he matured.
Yes.
That he went from the stand-up and the delivery and literally naming the last stand-up he did, Raw, and the early movies to when he was more of a single young man, and that was the Boomerang era. And then you had the Coming to America, and then it was Shrek. And then it was Daddy Daycare. And then it was, so you could even see the evolution in his maturity in his artistry.
Yes.
And so that was interesting to watch. So when he said it in the documentary and I looked back and reflected, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But Dave Chappelle said it best. Eddie Murphy survived being Eddie Murphy in the 80s. And that was a lot of, again, that decision. And he was so super hyper focused on this is what I was purposed to do. And there was no distraction to that.
Yeah.
They talked about in the documentaries his contemporaries of these mega black stars. And it was Eddie, and it was Michael, and it was Prince, and it was Whitney. Now, notice we ain't got to say no last names, and we don't have to say nothing else. When I say Prince, Michael, and Whitney, and Eddie, you know exactly who I'm talking about. No last names needed.
Yeah.
And so they talked about those being his contemporaries and how they handled fame versus how Eddie handled it. And a lot of it had to do with that family anchor and talking so extensively about his circle and who he kept around him. His brother Charlie being one of the chief among them in terms of that grounding. And then also that singular focus. And he said it in documentary. I knew if what they was doing in the other room, I'm here with my heroes in comedy, and they might have been snorting, doing stuff in the other room. I knew I needed to get up and do my thing the next day. So I was not even curious.
Wow, which was
Those were his. I wasn't even curious about it. There was nothing there for me because I'm that focused. And to your point, he didn't articulate it that way, that there was a maturity, there was a, because I am that focused on the end game and the goal that this other stuff, I know that this is a distraction and this is a detraction from where I'm going and not an addition.
Yeah.
You used a word, and we use it here on this podcast. Used the word earlier. We use it on this podcast often about door openers. You said he opened so many doors.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of the documentary about Eddie being a butler to so many.
Yes.
And it was so many.
Very unselfish.
Yes. Chris Rock, who contributed to the documentary, was among them and said there was this apprenticeship type of relationship that I had. So when we saw in Boomerang, Boney T, when we saw Boney T show up, which was Chris Rock's character in Boomerang, and saw him playing opposite Marcus, they had been together for years at that point. And I didn't really put that together. That might have been their first time on screen, but they had been together for years. Keenan Ivory Wayans tells the story often about the writing and the producing he did on Raw well before In Living Color and all the things we might have come to know Keenan for. And so the Hudlin brothers, one of the Hudlins was on and participated in the documentary and talked about Boomerang and the storytelling that Eddie wanted to do. And he used his stardom and his fame to tell a story like Boomerang, where there were Black executives centered in a romantic comedy and not which hadn't been done before, but because it was Eddie, he was able to do that. And so talk about that impact of Eddie being a butler on the industry.
It was, and again, when you're living through it in real time.
We were just laughing our way through.
We were just enjoying the ride.
Yes.
But when you pause and you think about, even I think about Harlem Nights.
Yes.
Where you have this cast of phenomenal actors and actresses.
Yes.
And and again, there's a lot of profanity in the movie.
Sure.
So if you can't handle profanity, I'm not asking you to go and watch Harlem Nights. But an observation.
I'm telling you, you need to go see Harlem Nights. That's whole Black history right there.
It is. But when you watch it, you'll notice how Eddie was not selfish with the comedic highs of it. Della Reese is going to shine. Red Fox is going to shine. Richard Pryor is going to shine. Arsenio Hall is going to shine. Even Tommy from Martin is going to shine. And you think about creating a piece like that takes discipline.
Yes.
And it takes a certain level of sacrifice. To your point, I want to open doors. You know what I mean? Boomerang. In Boomerang, they're in a scene. David Allen Greer and Martin Lawrence are hysterical.
Yes.
And Eddie Murphy's just kind of there. Right? Tisha Campbell, she's going to have her, and she's a comedic actress, but she's not a stand-up. She's going to have her
standout moments.
Yes. And I was recently
and let's not forget Pops.
He got a chance to shine. John Witherspoon.
Because we're going to coordinate. So let's not forget.
And I think the lesson is, I think, as facilitators, and me as a project manager, I love to bring people onto a project where they can showcase their gift, right? But there's something to be said about that. When you set a table where everybody can eat, they appreciate that. They respect you. And a lot of times they know he could have made a big movie without me.
Sure.
So this is not about maximizing the bottom line. He's trying to help people eat. You know what I mean? So that was, and again, in real time, you're like, you don't pay attention, but you start looking like, wow, when you get in a position where you can make decisions, how you make decisions through your individual POV of loyalty, of generosity,
Yes.
of each one reach one, or whatever you want to call it, it matters.
Yeah.
It matters. And you see what happened with Chris Rock. I mean, Chris Rock goes from Pookie in New Jack City to becoming
Chris Rock,
one of the one of the most thoughtful, socially conscious comedians of our era, bar none.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that says something, you know what I mean? And I feel like, again, if we, get into a conversation on faith, we know, about giving and receiving, and, you sow what you reap and all of that. But, it's very commendable, to me to see even life. I think about life and, him and Martin Lawrence, they were riffing, but then you had all these other stars, Bernie Mac, and, all these other people that had these memorable moments on camera.
Absolutely.
So somebody, was thinking of, we got to let everybody have a moment.
The Ensemble.
The Ensemble, Hakeem Woodbine, the mute character, but it was still very memorable.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I think it, and again, it's back to being surprised. A person with such a big talent was able to allow others to showcase their talent when it may have not been a necessity. I don't know if Paramount Films and none of these other was asking him, well, we want you to do less so you could, I don't know. Don't know, but I doubt it. You know what I mean? And that's not everybody's story.
No.
Hello, somebody. So I think that's a challenge to us and challenge, to the listeners of, how do you approach your craft and who are you helping through your gift? You know what I'm saying? And it's a good time to just shout out, there's a whole team that is supporting us in doing what we're doing,
like right now.
Right?
Yes, like literally.
We talking in these microphones, but we have an amazing team. Some that are here present right now.
Shout out. Let me look in this camera. Shout out to Brandon Johnson.
Come on now.
C2R Productions.
That's right.
Go ahead and Google them.
That's right.
Lead us into Brandon.
That's right.
Leave the commercial. Brandon, lead the commercial in.
Exactly.
Yeah, there we go. But Brandon, Aunt Lo with Aunt Lo Productions. Raven. With our social media.
Of our, graphic design team, Calhoun and others, that helping.
See, we messing around naming names now, so we're gonna get in trouble. Let's be cautious, just so we don't forget anybody. There we go. That's why I said we messing around trying to do names now. So now we're gonna be in trouble. But anyway, that's when it kicks in. That adolescent senior gonna kick in.
But there's something to be said. Because I'm grateful for where we're at. And, it feels good to be able to share, what I mean, what we do and what we have with highly skilled, highly competent, highly gifted people.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And looking at Eddie Murphy's career, it's clear that he's done that consistently.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Even we were looking at the credits on Raw, Keenan Ivory Reyes was writing the skit with him.
Robert Townsend in the credits.
Directed it.
Yes.
It's like, wow, that was, I think, 1987 or 86 or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, you're being intentional. I got something I'm working on.
That's right. Y'all pull up.
We gonna put this thing together, you know what I mean? And I think that's how it should be. You
Yes.
know what I mean? I think
But
that's how
that's a
it
big
should be.
lesson. That's a big lesson.
Absolutely.
The voice of the ensemble,
Yes,
um, and
absolutely.
Coming to America is another example. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh my goodness.
everybody
You
get
think
got
about
the
it.
time. Everybody got the time to shine.
Everybody took center stage.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Even though he played so many characters too.
he did. He did.
He played
He
so many
did.
characters too. And that was a great part to learn too, and a great part that I think is a wonderful way, because we can have this conversation just in so many ways
But we gonna
about.
land the
Yeah,
plane.
yeah, yes, that's what I said. We can have this conversation in so many ways, but we're going to land the plane because
On behalf of TSA workers, we gonna land the plane.
that was last week's episode.
Yeah.
On behalf of the TSA workers that we hope are back at work
Oh,
now, praise the
help
Lord.
us, help us.
We're gonna land the plane. But one of the things that came out and was really very clear that I felt like I learned about
Mhm.
Eddie Murphy is that uh gosh, he said so much. He wasn't afraid to pivot. He does
Mhm.
not even do that laugh anymore. That was his
Yeah.
signature laugh,
Wow.
because not letting things distract from his artistry.
Yes.
The same documentary talked about him having number one box office hits and a hit song at the same time. In the documentary, you will see him playing instruments. You will see him just exposing himself, and he refers to himself as an artist,
Yes.
as an
Yes.
artist, and as an artist whose art may manifest in different ways, but I am an artist.
Yes.
And so, for our listeners and for people that really struggle, and now they use a term called multi hyphenate,
Mm.
Oh, you haven't heard that term? I've
Multi-hyphenate.
Yes, multi
Mm.
hyphenate. Those are people that will say things like, "Well, I'm an artist and I'm a pastor and I'm a
Mm.
writer and
Mhm.
and so people that have difficulty defining
Oh,
themselves,
okay, got it. Okay.
or don't want to be defined. I won't say have difficulty defining
Mm.
themselves. Maybe that's cheapening it a little bit too much. But people that don't want to be defined
Got
by
it.
one thing in particular will say, "I'm a multi hyphenate."
Got it. Okay.
Fancy way for saying I do a lot of stuff
Yeah.
and I'm good at a lot of stuff.
So
That's
fancy.
very millennial. Very
Oh,
we
fancy.
our Gen X way. We just say, "Oh, I do a lot of
Yeah.
stuff." But yeah, I'm a multi hyphenate.
Yeah.
But Eddie describes it with just saying, "I'm an artist."
Mm. Mhm.
And I'm an artist, and my artistry might manifest itself a variety of different ways. And he very clearly said, as long as I'm having fun doing it, and as long as I think that it's good, that's always the best stuff that I've put out.
Mm.
If I'm enjoying it, if I'm having fun, if I am still more invested in the process, so to
Yeah.
speak, than the product never lets me down.
Mm. Okay.
And so, as you were thinking about maybe a final word or a final takeaway for our listeners, and there's always so many people that have difficulty
Mm.
um, defining what it is they do, or
Mm.
what it is that they bring to the table, or don't know how to converge, all of these different things that they might be passionate about. What can you say to them based on
Mm. Yeah,
this
that's
documentary?
hard. You know what I mean? That's I feel like that's a whole separate podcast. That's an episode. But I will share one thought
Yes,
regarding that. I would say, to the listeners, take a time out from the comparison disease that so many people have. Because when you become obsessive with comparison, you can lose yourself, you can lose your uniqueness, you can lose your identity. You know what I mean? So I would say chill on comparison. If you need to take a break from social media for
that
a little
part.
while, do that so that you can really spend time with yourself, spend time with your victories, your defeats, um, spend time reflecting on your resume, just to remember what you have done.
Mhm.
Think about the positions. Think about the moments of significance
Mhm.
that you've had over your career, or had, in your life. It was like,
Mhm.
wow, what was it about that moment that was so significant?
Yes.
Why did I feel like I had climbed Mount Everest in that moment? Why did I feel so fulfilled in that moment?
Yes.
We have to do inventory. We talk a lot about that. You have to do self inventory to
Mhm.
really find your unique gift or your unique value add. And I
Mhm.
know that people, the term purpose has been oversaturated,
Mhm.
and some people in faith circles think that that's a whole thing. And I don't want to get into that, but I would encourage people, pause on comparison, lean into your story, your journey, and try and find those moments of significance. You know what I mean? Those moments of significance, and then I think that can really help, because to me, when you identify those moments of significance,
Mhm.
those moments of, you can start to project into the future, say, wow, I want to do more of that.
Yes.
I
Yes.
want to figure out how to replicate that convergence,
Yes.
of helping. I mean, it may be a moment
Yes.
of helping, it may be a moment of fulfilling, it may be a moment of giving back, but also allowing your gift to be exercised. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So that would be my final word, on this. And you think about Eddie Murphy, it was in a closing thought on him, I think it was Arsenio Hall, or one of his good friends was saying, you go through his house and you see all of these ideas that are written down.
Yes.
It
Yes.
may be a script, it may just be an idea. And he was
Yep.
even talking about, he would just record ideas into
Yeah.
his phone. In other words, when you tap into your uniqueness,
Mhm.
your gifting, then it will become a creative well, if you
Mhm.
will. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? That creates not only for you but for others. But
Mhm.
i'm gonna I'm gonna land the
Gonna land the
plane on
plane right
that,
there.
yeah,
Gonna
because you'll
land.
say, oh, there go preacher talk, he talking
No,
too
no,
long,
you had me
he
thinking.
talking too long.
You had me thinking about Elder Michelle Love describes them as doodles.
That's right, that's right.
That's her word
Elder
that I
Michelle Love,
yes, that I stole that from her.
curator and founder of the God Project.
Come on now. Come on now.
So
Another shout
yeah,
out. But that's
absolutely.
how she describes that
Yes,
process
yes,
of how God will give us
yes.
a little bit, just a little bit at a time. And so
Yeah,
that she doesn't lose it. She describes it as a doodle. And she's also a creative and a wonderful musician and
absolutely.
composer and
Absolutely.
classically trained pianists and all of those things. And so
Absolutely.
I think there's wonderful things for those of us that are not creatives
Hmm.
that we can get language around
Yes.
and practice around
Inspiration.
tapping and inspiration around tapping into that level of creativity
Absolutely.
for ourselves. That's it.
Absolutely.
So if you haven't seen the documentary, if you have not seen the documentary Being Eddie on Netflix, we encourage you to check it out. Borrow somebody else Netflix because Netflix tripping now.
Yeah, I don't think you
Netflix
can
don't
do
let you
that.
borrow Netflix like it used to anymore.
Never.
So you might have to go over to your neighbor's house and use their Wi-Fi to actually see it. So whether you have Netflix or you need to jump on somebody else's, that was such a great documentary, so much to
It
learn.
was.
And we love to continue to have this conversation with you in the comments about your takeaways and things that you took out of the documentary and definitely look forward to keeping this conversation going and for this next generation for Eddie Murphy Sean Connery era. I think
That was
somebody
mentioned in the
described it that was
documentary. So
mentioned next, so we're excited to see what he does next in his career, and we're so grateful for that laughter over the years, for sure, for sure.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
So with that, we are going to sign off. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of With Love the Chambers.
Yes.
We would encourage you and request and solicit. Please hit the like button. Please hit the share button. drop a comment. If you haven't subscribed to us, please subscribe. We need your help in cracking this algorithm
Yes.
and also growing our audience. We believe that these conversations are not just for us, they're not just for you, but they're for people that you and I know that just need a productive, fruitful conversation to get us through each day. So we're going to sign off from the
Yes.
conversation room.
Yes.
My name is Rufus Chambers.
And I'm Jamila Chambers.
And we'll see you again next time. God bless.
This episode of With Love, the Chambers is proudly sponsored by the Watts of Power Foundation, where passion and purpose come together to empower the next generation. In the heart of Los Angeles, one foundation is changing the future of education. The Watts of Power Foundation, founded by Dr. Peter Watts Jr., is on a mission to raise up the next generation of Black male educators, building strong teachers, strong families, and strong communities. Through mentorship, housing, and holistic support, Watts of Power is lighting the path toward equity in education. Visit wattsofpowerfoundation.org to learn how you can help power the change. The Watts of Power Foundation, where teaching meets transformation. A big thank you to Watts of Power for supporting this episode of With Love, the Chambers.
That's a wrap for today's episode of With Love, the Chambers.
We hope you laughed, learned, and felt encouraged along the way.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs a little love and wisdom today.
You can also connect with us online on all social media platforms at Rufus Chambers Online and at Jamila Chambers. We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time,
Keep living, keep laughing, and keep learning with love, the Chambers.